Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grace Every Day, a podcast for Christian wives of blue collar guys. In the last couple episodes, I talked about leading yourself well in order to lead and influence your family. And I think it's helpful if I share with you an overview of the ladder of influence so you have an understanding of how influence and leadership of others works. I'm a very practical person, I like actual practical application. So, this episode, I'm going to share with you what the ladder of influence is and talk about how to climb it. And next week's episode is going to focus on kind of some practical tips to climb the ladder of influence with your spouse. So, the ladder of influence is a framework. It's a simple framework, but it's powerful because it helps you realize the practical steps that you can take to increase your influence with the people around you. Now, this could be applied to friends or family or coworkers, your boss, community members, even your children, and certainly your spouse, because these are principles, right? Principles of leadership and influence. Now, before I dig into the actual ladder of influence itself, there are three things that you need to know. Number one, you cannot change anyone except yourself. The ladder of influence is not a framework to fix others or make other people listen to you. It's about accepting responsibility for what you can change and then having the courage and making the right choices and then taking the right actions to make those changes. And most of the time, you can increase your influence with someone, but you have to start blaming them and start working on what you can change yourself. Viktor Frankl said, "When I can no longer change a situation, I am challenged to change myself." Now, this is not easy, right? We blame other people because it's easy to blame other people, but we don't have any control over that. We cannot make someone else do something. So the moment we stop blaming others is the moment we take responsibility. And humans just naturally want to externalize blame. It's just human nature, but that doesn't serve us. Because if we always believe it's up to the other person to change, what happens if they never do? The greatest limiting belief is what I call the victim mindset, believing you cannot improve your circumstances or increase your influence or change your circumstances because of someone or something else. And playing the victim is not going to take you forward in life. It won't help you be successful. It won't help you realize your potential. You cannot change most things. You cannot change everything, but you always have the power to change yourself. And when you find that courage and develop the wisdom to understand that changing yourself changes the world, your world. So there will be you cannot change anyone else except yourself. Now, number two, there will be people that you simply cannot influence because they don't share your values. And if you don't have enough of the same shared values or mutual values, they're not going to value being influenced by you. And there are going to be some people you cannot influence. For example, if you value growth and development of yourself, then someone who doesn't value that is not going to want to be influenced by you, is not going to want to be impacted by you. They just simply aren't interested, right? It's not about blaming them, though. There will be some people that you cannot influence, but don't blame them or fight them. They're just going a different direction in life, and it's their life. They get to choose which direction they will want to travel. But stay positive and stay true to your course and just focus on, again, what you can do in increasing your influence yourself, leadership of self first. And sometimes you might be surprised that you can gain influence with those other people simply because you refuse to give up on doing the right thing, right? So stay positive. Don't blame them. Just accept that responsibility. And number three, you never stop climbing the ladder of influence. That's because we're at different places and different times with different people. And you can be at different steps on the ladder of influence with different people at the same time. So, for example, hopefully you have a good bit of influence with your spouse and your family. And that's based on the relationship over time, right? If you just meet someone and you've only known them a few days, you're not going to have very much influence with them authentically because you haven't developed a good relationship yet. You haven't developed the trust. Influence and leadership is based on relationships. Relationships are built on trust. So you will be at different steps of the ladder of influence with different people at the same time, and you never stop climbing. Because the foundational concept of the ladder of influence is that you focus on first control of self and then development of your character. And you're never going to stop doing that, right? You can't get to a certain level on the ladder of influence and then say, oh, I don't have to control my temper anymore, right? It doesn't work like that. You always have to just make sure that you're still focusing on the foundational step, the control of self step. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But that's the third thing you absolutely must know is that you never stop climbing. Now, here's the thing. If you inadvertently or intentionally do something to rupture a relationship and you fall off the ladder of influence, so to speak, you lose influence with some person, you might be able to rebuild a relationship, but only by going back down to that bottom foundational step and starting again. And it's kind of like Humpty Dumpty, right? Once you drop that egg, it's hard to put it back together again. It's not going to be exactly the same. Relationships are the same way. Relationships should never be taken for granted because if we do something to fall off that ladder of influence in any relationship, it's difficult to repair that relationship. So just be mindful of that. Now, just like a real ladder, a real ladder, you have to start at the bottom and then start climbing, right? The ladder of influence is exactly the same. You start at the bottom in every relationship, control of self, and you have to do the climbing. Nobody else can or will do it for you. I've touched on it, but the bottom step on the ladder of influence is control of self. Now, I love this in context of First Corinthians 9:27, which says, "But I discipline my body and bring it into subjection." Now, the last couple of episodes before, not when I had a guest on here, but the last couple of episodes when it was me, I was sharing on healthy habits, and we've shared about self-worth and self-discipline, right? And this is absolutely applicable to control of self. And this is important because it can increase our influence, because I cannot influence other people at a very effective high level if I don't have the ability to lead myself well, to control myself, to conquer that inner 2-year-old that wants to just always have their own way, that always wants to do the things that feel good in the moment or eat everything that tastes good in the moment, right? Control of self, that discipline of self in our physical body is, and bringing that into subjection is one of the key elements of influence. Now, control of self isn't just about physical discipline or physical body, but also controlling our emotions. Proverbs 16:32 says, "Whoever is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit is better than he who takes a city." Think about that, right? Whoever is slow to anger is better than the mighty. And that's one of the key things about being proactive and having control of self is being able to control the emotions in the heat of the moment. I've touched on it before, but the emotions are there. There's nothing wrong with having emotions. We're human, it's natural, it's how God created us. But we have the ability to say those emotions are there, but they don't have to dictate how I respond to this situation in this moment. And that means your feelings don't get to decide your outcomes in life. And that's powerful. It's one of those greatest freedoms that when we realize that we can master our emotions, not ignoring them, not shoving them into the closet of our emotional mind, but just saying they're there, but I don't have to respond to them. I don't have to let them impact my choices, actions, and behaviors. That's a fundamental principle, right? But that's the key to control of self to then influence other people. Because think about it from your perspective. I'm sure you've never had anybody blow up and get mad at you and lose their temper at you and blame you for something. And you thought, man, I trust you and like you so much more now that you're yelling and blaming me for something, right? We're human. We all are going to have those emotional moments, but that doesn't increase our influence, particularly with proactive people, with people who really value control of self. And if you lose that control of self, it's going to be really difficult to increase your influence with them. So, this is one of those things, is like a mind muscle, just like our physical muscles get stronger when we exercise, so does the mind muscle. And it's one of those things, the more often we get it right, the easier it is to get it right. But none of us are perfect. Don't beat yourself up when you get it wrong, but learn to look for the lesson and learn to look for, how can I do it better next time? What was the situation there? What was the trigger there? What can I do next time instead of losing control of self? What else should I be doing? Again, just learning from our mistakes. We are going to make mistakes, but mistakes can be valuable if we learn from them. Now, the second step on the ladder of influence is character development, and that's developing who we are as a person, growing as a person. Think of it this way: competency is the technical skills, knowledge, experience, aptitude, abilities to do something. And that's the third step on the ladder of influence. I'm going to touch on those two kind of together here. But the second step, the character development step, is character is recognized and attributed to as much as 87 to 90% of our success in life and our influence with other people, right? 87 to 90% of our success in life and our influence with other people is based on who we are as a person, not just what we know how to do. You have to know how to do things in life. You have to be competent, whether you are staying at home and it's competency in washing laundry and cooking dinner, or whether you have a side business or you're a CEO of another person's business. You've got to have a competency, a skill. And that can increase your influence, but it's not going to increase your influence nearly as much as development of who you are, the character of a person. And character, ironically, we a lot of times call them soft skills, attitude, ability to be at work on time, integrity. Can I get along with other people? Right? All of those things are character based attributes, but they're determining the majority of our influence in relationships, right? I might have the greatest competency in the world, but if you can't count on me to be on time for work when you need me, then I'm going to lose some influence with you if you're the boss, right? I mean, that's just one of those things that it's a non-negotiable. If I need to be able to trust you that you're here when you say you're going to be here, or that when you're here when the job needs doing. So, thinking about that, a lot of times, once we start to get a grip on control of self, what holds us back from success is development of character, because it's easy in our culture to just want to circumvent character development and move on to competency development, because that's how we talk about in our society about how we get ahead. We go to college and get a degree, or go to a technical school, or learn a trade, or start a business or something like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But again, it often appears that that's the shortcut to success, when in fact, if we would make sure to grow and develop who we are as a person, as well as what we know how to do, we would see our success and influence skyrocket exponentially. Um, Now, the thing about character growth, it's usually not fun. It's usually not fun. We'll do a future episode on specifically how you can tap into that character development, and kind of some specific strategies. But for now, just leave it at that. That character development is usually not fun. It's one of those things like exercise that you have to decide to go do, and there are going to be days when you don't always feel like it, and you're going to have to do it anyway because you value where it will take you. So look for that in a future episode. The third step, as I touched on the ladder of influence, is the competency development. This is where, based on top of your character, we're moving up those layers or the steps of the ladder of influence. You've got to, again, be competency in what you're doing, whatever that is. It's almost the skill or the technical ability or the do the work kind of step here. And what I really like to talk about at this step is that finding that sweet spot in competency where you are good and gifted and also passionate, because that's where you are going to shine, right? Shine like a star in those areas where you are gifted and excited about what you're doing. If you're not excited about it, if you're not passionate about it, you're never going to put as much energy and be as enthusiastic about doing it as someone who is. And if you're not particularly gifted at it, then you're never going to be really better than average, or maybe a little better than average at doing it. So make sure that you are just digging into those areas where you are both gifted and passionate about what you're doing. The fourth step on the ladder of influence is commitment to developing others. And I'm not going to talk a lot about the fourth and fifth step here, because these first three steps are really more relevant to where we're going in the next couple of episodes, with increasing your influence at home and with your spouse specifically. But just to wrap up our overview here of the ladder of influence, the fourth step, commitment to developing others. And this is mentoring someone, pouring back into someone, you know, helping them grow, helping them climb the ladder of influence. And the one thing that I want to touch on here is that it's important to make sure that when we are trying to get to this level, this step on the ladder of influence ourselves, that commitment to developing others and helping them be successful is a commitment to helping them be successful as they define it, not as we would necessarily see it for them. It's being able to let go of what we think they should do, but empowering them and equipping them to be able to do it as they would define their goals and dreams or success. Not being attached to who we want them to become, because we don't want to limit that. Each individual for themselves has to decide what that goal is, that success for themselves is, what their potential is. We cannot do it for them. We can guide them. We can help facilitate. But at the end of the day, make sure that you are not trying to transfer your version of success or your dreams onto somebody else's reality. The fifth and final step on the ladder of influence is the contribution of service over time. And this is where legacy is created, right? Where we've really seen people who have done what they've done for so long, for so many people. They've made the sacrifice time and time again for years, over time, because they value other people. And they've done it for so many people for so long that eventually they get to that fifth and final step on the ladder of influence, influencing other people who they've maybe perhaps never even met, because of what they've done for so many people for so long. Your influence at any step on the ladder of influence is built over time by choices and words, actions, interactions, because with every interaction with someone, with every word, every deed, we are either building influence with the people around us and moving higher up the ladder of influence, or we are decreasing influence and slipping back. Mac and I often use the analogy of the emotional bank account that Stephen Covey refers to. Putting a deposit into the emotional bank account, that relationship account, a little deposit of trust, a little bit deposit of influence, instead of taking withdrawals out. We have to be intentional about that. Because when it comes to influence, who we are matters. What we say matters. What we do matters. In fact, what we do matters more than what we say, because who we are on the inside is going to determine how people experience us on the outside. And most of our influence is built more by what we do than what we say. You've heard the cliche, a lot of times parents say to their children, do as I say, not as I do. And that's terrible, because as a role model, that parent is basically saying, I'm not a good role model, but I want you to take on this behavior or do this something that I'm not willing to do myself. So just learning to walk the walk and not just talk the talk, because that's going to impact our influence at a greater level. Actions always speak louder than words. So that's just a brief overview of the ladder of influence. And you can pick up a copy of the book on Amazon if you want to dig in deeper, or better yet, you can download the first few chapters for free at riastory.com/download. You don't have to put an email in, you don't have to put a credit card in or anything like that. It's just a link. You can go download those first few chapters, kind of dig in deeper. And again, the book is available both on my website and, of course, on Amazon. The Ladder of Influence: 5 Steps for Climbing to the Next Level and Beyond. So next week, we're going to take that ladder of influence and dig into some practical ways that you can increase your influence with your spouse. Because I want to start with that relationship that's close to home, right? The one that's close to home for most of us. So be looking for that episode to drop next week. And remember, life is tough, but God's grace is always enough. Until next time.